Texas, I'm Jack Blood, guest hosting. We have been doing that for about the last month, and hopefully with your support, we'll be here for at least another week. We'll introduce our guest, Jerri Lynn Ward. Jerri, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome to have you in. We'll tell people, I wanted to go to this. We have a great report. We were on a national press conference regarding the NDAA. Most people know about it now, which is an amazing thing. People that aren't aware of the fascist dictator position of the United States of America and the federal government have now found out about the NDAA, unlawful detention of Americans without a trial, and are pretty upset about it. So I want to give a report on that. But so that people know who you are, Jerri Lynn Ward, tell people who you are and what you've been doing.
Well, first of all, I'm an attorney, and I have been very active in the grassroots for Ron Paul. I've known about Ron Paul since the 1970s and have followed his career and have always thought he was a very great man and that his positions are completely right. And so it's been my pleasure to work on his grassroots campaign. I worked on it in 2007, 2008, and I continue working on it. And I am very heartened by what has happened since 2008 because I think a lot more people have come to an understanding of what he represents and have taken heed finally of the problems that he has been pointing out for over 30 years because they're all coming to fruition.
You speak to certainly middle America, conservative America. I speak to Austin, Texas, where the show is broadcast, and to our audience on the internet. You would consider yourself, I'm sure, a real conservative, a Christian conservative, and a Ron Paul conservative, Ron Paul Republican. What's gone wrong with the Republican Party, Jerri? You can see all the excitement. In fact, if you just isolate the Republican Party to the Ron Paul wing of the party, it looks like Obama leading up into 2008. All this excitement and all these great ideas and young people coming in. What's wrong with the rest of the party?
Well, I think the problem with the party started when many Democrats of the neoconservative variety started coming over to the Republican Party and changed it from a small government, a supporter of small government and fiscal conservatism in favor of a big government, American exceptionalism type of party. So there has been a philosophical shift from the early days, the days of Taft and on down, and that philosophical shift, I think, is going to be the death knell of the party because, to me, it's become no different than the Democratic Party when it comes to war and big government. But moreover, I am a Christian, and I believe that our country was built on Christian principles, and I think that the Republican Party touts itself as pro-life and pro-Christian. However, I don't believe that it is. I think it has become bread alone and has none of the no undergirding of Christian principles whatsoever anymore, with the exception of Ron Paul, who has a completely biblical worldview of the economy, of war, and of the limitations that Christ and God have put on the civil government.
So you're a Christian Republican and you support Ron Paul. Are you struggling with this foreign policy? Like so many Republicans, we hear that, well, they love him on foreign policy. They love the fact that he's pro-life. We love the fact that he's been consistent and that he hasn't been part of the problem in Washington, rather that he's been part of the solution. You can be very proud of his moniker of Dr. No, considering the kinds of legislations that have come through. So are you having problems with this foreign policy? And if so, if not, what is the problem with the rest of mainstream Republican Christian America, Republicans, that can't see the forest through the trees? And I've just editorialized on that.
I completely support Ron Paul's views on foreign policy. His views are based on Christian principles. Preemptive war is not a Christian principle. The idea that we can go with impunity and invade other countries is not a Christian principle. Defense is a Christian principle, and what we are doing is not defense, it's offense. So I have no problems with his foreign policy. And Republicans used to believe that sort of thing. They used to believe that you don't go looking for trouble out in the world, that we're not the policemen of the world, and that we should not entangle ourselves in foreign conflicts. They believed that earlier in the century of the 1900s. They believed that, and at some point they shifted, and I think a lot of it had to do with neoconservatives coming over from the Democratic Party and imbuing the Republican Party
Was
with
it the Democratic
their ideas.
Party, or was it the Nazi Socialist Communist Party that the neocons came from?
Well, they definitely are Trotskyites because they believe in endless war, and so they definitely have a Trotskyite Marxist view of the world. And moreover, they have a view that the world will be saved through politics and through war, which is demonic.
And that's the perverted American exceptionalism angle that gets promoted by people like Rick Santorum and now Newt Gingrich, and anybody that seems to feel they have to really comply with this neoconservative ethic in order to get the Republican nomination. It was funny because George Bush, before 9/11, George Bush Jr. was campaigning on a humble foreign policy, as Ron Paul reminds us, and compassionate conservatism. And did 9/11 just change everyone's mind, or did it just let these crazies from the basement upstairs to the main room?
Well, I don't believe that he was a non-interventionist in the least. I think he always had
Rhetoric.
that in mind, that was rhetoric, because they had the plans drawn up to invade Iraq even before 9/11 is my understanding. And as far as, I want to say this about American exceptionalism, because you're right, they have perverted what that means. That concept is based on a speech that was, or a sermon that was made by the governor of the colony of Massachusetts, John Winthrop, whereby he envisioned that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts would be a Christian commonwealth based on Christian charity, and that it would be a shining, or that it would be a city on the hill, just as was discussed in the Bible and by St. Augustine. It had nothing to do with arrogance, with thinking that Americans, by virtue of their place of birth, were somehow superior to other people in this world. It is a total perversion, and that perversion, along with Christian dispensationalism in some Christian denominations, has created a murderous government that thinks it is fine to go kill non-combatants and to wage total war on others without ever having been attacked.
And this is very expensive, and trillions of dollars to go, which we know our military is being used as a corporate security force, and that's what I think is most destructive here. If you read Smedley Butler's book, War is a Racket, or listen to his speech, and he was a highly decorated Marine, in fact, one of the most in history, he'll tell you that he believed in the cause of fighting for freedom and democracy abroad, and then he found out that he was being sent to, fight these wars for Standard Oil or ExxonMobil or for the Rockefellers, and he began denouncing this foreign interventionalism on the basis of that it's none of our business and it costs too much and it causes blowback. I mean, there's not a lot of difference between Ron Paul and Smedley Butler. They both served, they've both seen it for themselves, and they're both warning the American people. So how did you feel then as a Christian when at the debate in Florida, I believe it was, the audience booed Ron Paul when he was talking about the Golden Rule?
Well, I thought it was disgusting, but that's the second time it happened, because it happened in 2008 at the Values Voter debate that Phyllis Schlafly and others had sponsored. When he brought up the Golden Rule and that, or doing to others, or the Golden Rule in that particular debate, they booed him. And that is because some warlike philosophy has invaded the theology of some Christian churches.
Well, I'm not a Christian, and it offended me because I believe the Golden Rule do unto others as they would have you do, you would have them do unto you. I believe things like love yourself and love your neighbor. I just really believe that these are principles that can transcend through life, period. And that's why, Jerry, we agree on so much, and even though we come from different backgrounds and we're both supporting the same candidate for president, and I think there's a lot of people in the Ron Paul campaign that are supporters that don't care about what religion the other guy is, as long as, you know, we follow simple edicts like the Golden Rule. It's really not that hard to understand. But I think that if I was going to play, excuse the term, devil's advocate here, I would take Rick Santorum's position and say, well, they've done unto us. The only problem is that's not the whole history, because we've done unto them and then they've done back to us, and it's this constant revenge. Not to mention the fact that most of the, well, I'm just mentioning it now then, that most of the people that we call terrorists or terrorist organizations are funded and trained and armed by the very people like Rick Santorum that want to go out and spend our resources and the lives of our men, women, and children to defend this country. So it's very hypocritical for them to right now use terrorist groups to take over Syria and overthrow Syria, and then turn around a year later and say, well, because of these terrorist groups, we've got to have something like the NDAA. Very convenient.
The problem is Rick Santorum is not principled. He's a pure pragmatist. So when it's a matter of arming these groups that are supposedly radical Islamists for what he perceives is an American interest, instead of resting on principle, the fact that we have no business doing that, he rested on his own view of pragmatism, which is totally anti-Christian. And moreover, I do not understand his theology, because when you talk about the Golden Rule and you talk about love one another, loving one another is not some sappy feeling that you have about other people. What it is doing justice to others. The Bible is the greatest book of justice that has ever been written, because all justice came from the Creator. That means you don't murder people, you don't go over and cluster bomb whole villages and then claim, well, we didn't intend to kill non-combatants, therefore it's okay. It's murder. We don't go steal lands. We don't go do the things that are laid out in the Ten Commandments. That's what Christian love is. It's giving justice as defined by God to others.
Well, and the same could be said about a Buddhist philosophy and many other. When you get to the core of some of the world's religions and philosophies, they're very similar, and none of them say to go out and kill people. I think even to interpret the Quran, or for that matter the Torah, to say we should just kill the whole planet is taking a few liberties with some of the language, though this again is part of the problem with sectarian philosophies, is that, well, you know, my God can beat up your God, and it hasn't that kind of gotten to a point now where we can no longer afford these God fights in the world? I mean, this has been responsible for a lot of the violence in the world, and that we've known it, and it's been the excuse certainly for stealing people's resources and for taking people's liberties. You know, why is it that it's been so perverted, in your opinion? And I don't want to get into a big theological discussion here, but just in your opinion, Jerry, why is it that these great, loving philosophies that we can all get along and we can all live here and not harm each other and steal each other's stuff has been so perverted over the millennia?
Well, I don't know about the other things, but I'll tell you that the warfare that Christians are supposed to engage in is spiritual warfare in the form of the Great Commission, which is to bring the word to others, not to convert by the sword, and not to do some of the things and think some of the thoughts and say some of the things that we've been saying about Muslims in our own country. My whole position is that for those that are fearful of Sharia law, fearful of Muslims, Christians should organize missionaries to go bring those people the word, not try to kill them.
Well, and for the Christians out there that are really so deathly afraid of this thing called Sharia law that's supposedly going to usurp our Constitution here in the United States of America, I just think this is crazy talk, and I don't like to use that term, and so I don't use it lightly. They should look into something called the Noahide laws, which do come from, at least they've been alleged to come from the Torah, and have been implemented into our judicial system in a way that I think is very similar in some ways, shapes, and forms to Sharia law. I just don't see a day in this country in my lifetime, and I guess I'm just taking this too lightly according to Sean Hannity, Sean Vanity as we call him. I just don't see a time when I'm going to be stoned for adultery or something in this country, and maybe in their own communities that they're bringing their traditions with them. That's really not different than any other immigrant or minority in this country. They like to do things in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods, the way they like to do them. In my neighborhood, at least according to my neighbors, we like freedom, and we like to be left alone. We don't like the code enforcement to come and say that if we're having, for instance, a Bible study or a study about the Constitution with more than 3 people, that we need a permit. That's actually code in most places in the country. We don't like these very same people to come. Remember the BTK killer? He was a code enforcement officer, right?
Yeah.
We don't like, people harassing old ladies because their lawn is an inch too long, or that they're collecting rainwater against the law. So I think that's how we want things in our neighborhood, and I'm perfectly willing to let you, whoever you are, do things the way you want in your town, county, city, or neighborhood. So I guess what this gets at is, and I think what Ron Paul really talks a lot about, is decentralization. And that seems to be, G. Edward Griffin, if you know him, look him up, folks, if you don't know the great G. Edward Griffin. He has something called Freedom Force International. I'm a honored member of there, and has written one of the definitive books about the Federal Reserve. But he breaks it down and makes it real simple. People say, well, what do you do about all of this? And he says, decentralize and repeal. And when we see, and this came up in the debate, well, here's all the laws we made, and here's why we're so great. And one of the big knocks on Ron Paul is that he didn't get a lot of laws through. Well, first of all, until recently, he didn't have a lot of support. But he's been trying to repeal unconstitutional legislation, which makes him my hero. So, this is how you get up in the political world. How many laws did you create? Look at someone like Rudy Giuliani. He made his career, same thing with Elliot Spitzer, and you look at the moral character of these guys. One guy wears a dress and kisses Donald Trump, and the other guy got caught in a massive prostitution scandal. So this is, I guess, what we're supposed to be doing or following in this country. But this is how politicians get ahead. They make laws about nothing to control every little piece of our life, and then they go out on the stump, like Newt Gingrich or Rick Santorum, and they talk about all these great things they've done for the country and what they want to do for the country. It's really simple. Decentralize and repeal. Decentralize gives us the power to decide our own futures, and that is, again, we have a rule of law in this country, so it does have to be guided by the U.S. Constitution, and then even greater, the state constitution. But we can't seem to get this concept through to our city council or to our state legislature. If you remember, we were fighting these airport scanners, and we actually won. We won, and we set a big precedent here for the whole country and this great economy, this great state called Texas. And they threatened us with a no-fly zone, as if we were Libya in this country, our own legislature. Yeah. Dewhurst, talking to you, man. What right do you have to run for anything? You're done, buddy. Sorry,
Well, that's exactly right. And talking about the Republicans that praise these politicians for passing too many laws, it's the kind of double thinking that was described in Orwell's 1984, holding two opposing ideas at the same time. Yeah. Well, double thinking.
Group think, double speak.
Well, it's where people hold two opposing ideas at the same time. So you've got the Republican grassroots saying they want limited government, but at the same time touting politicians like Santorum and Romney and others who approved a myriad of laws and regulations. That is insane. And yes, to me, one of the heroic things about Ron Paul is that he did not try to get notches on his belt by passing legislation in order to improve,
like a bureaucrat.
Yeah, in order to improve his political resume. It is disgusting, and the grassroots Republicans really need to rethink that and really think about what limited government is, because it's certainly not passing a bunch of laws and lauding politicians for doing that.
I think what Rick Santorum would say, again playing the devil's advocate here, remember this is a guy, he belongs to this secret society called Opus Dei, which a good many of our Supreme Court members have pledged their allegiance to. I want people to look into that. His family also, just getting into Rick Santorum for a second, his family, going back just a generation or two, were fascists.
They were communists.
Communists?
They were members of the Communist Party.
But they were also fascists. Some of his members of his family were fascists as well, with Mussolini.
Oh.
I know. You learn something.
Well, they're collectivists. You know,
Exactly.
Fascists and communists are collectivists. What's the difference, really?
So what he's going to say is, well, what you do over in your city or your state is going to bleed over into my state and it's going to ruin things for me. Even though you haven't done anything yet, you might do something. So it's not even just preemptive strikes on Iran, it's preemptive strikes on Dallas or on Houston or on San Antonio or even Hayes County, you know, if you live here in Austin. And that kind of thinking is collectivism and groupthink. How can he call himself a right-wing or a conservative or a Republican if he's this much of a collectivist? And how, I understand how he can do it, but tell me this, how can all these people go along with it?
Well, I don't know. They think he's a conservative because of his pro-life stance, and I'm very pro-life. I totally disagree with him on wanting to keep that issue at the federal level, because I agree with you about decentralization. And it may be that when his folks immigrated, we had stopped doing a good job in teaching exactly why the War of Independence occurred. It occurred because the colonials valued decentralization. Most of the political authority at that time was focused at the county and local area, and not nationally or even colony-wide, and that was one of the big fights they had with the Crown, because they wanted to keep authority as close to the people as possible so that the people would have some say over what authority was being exercised by civil government. And I guess he doesn't understand that. And the perfect example is the fact that he doesn't agree with Ron Paul in overturning Roe versus Wade by stripping jurisdictions from the federal courts of that whole issue, which would destroy Roe versus Wade and take the decision down to the state level. And he and others in that movement are saying we don't want to do that because some states will still have abortion. Well, guess what? Almost every state, in fact, I can't even think of a state that had totally legalized abortion before Roe versus Wade, so I do not accept his position.
It's one example, Jerry. The thing is, I'm going to disagree with people who are pro-death. I'm just going to have that disagreement with them. I think that there will be a time where we can hammer this out. I just don't see how, with everything going on in the world now, all the things, all the problems, we're going to talk about the NDAA, this fascist document, speaking of King George here in a second. With everything we've got to deal with on our plate, is that a reason not to vote for Ron Paul or to vote for Rick Santorum or Mitt Romney? We don't know where he stands on the issue, so I guess he won't be getting anyone's vote that cares about that. Because the media is trying to make the Republican Party out to look like a party that is not for women's choice, is not for, and let's not get into the whole debate here, not for contraception, which I don't even think is true. And they're trying to stage the debate as an abortion, pro-life, contraception debate, and a 99% against 1% debate, so that Obama, who would normally, without all of this help and all of this money, be drummed out for sure here in November, is most likely going to win because of this fake, phony debate that we're having. I can't believe, Jerri, that most Americans are more concerned about the issue of abortion or contraception than they are going broke.
Well, I'm very concerned about the issue of abortion, but I think it belongs at the state level and not at the federal level.
Well, let me ask you this. If Ron Paul was for abortion, would you not? Would he lose your support?
I would start questioning that, quite frankly. But if he took the position that that Roe versus Wade should be destroyed by jurisdiction stripping from the federal courts, bringing it down to the state level, I might be able to live with that. But that is an important issue, because that is a matter of a human being being targeted for death because of their location in the womb. And the reason Ron Paul is pro-life is because he believes in liberty for all. So that's what is so attractive to me. But the thing is,
I mean, he is an OBGYN that's
yes,
delivered thousands of babies. I might defer to him if I wasn't clear on the subject. But I've talked to people that I know that are very sensible people who, and now we're kind of falling into it on this show with this debate that's been on NMSNBC every night. But I know people that are very sensible people that normally, and probably like everything else Ron Paul says, but they're offended somehow that they're losing it. And to make the debate about that, it's very risky. And I think that's playing right into the Democrats' hands. That's exactly what they want.
You're not going to take that out of the debate, because many people in the grassroots Republican community, that's a very important issue to them. And my whole approach has been, I agree that's an important issue, but it is an issue that belongs at the state level, because there are a lot of pro-life people who will not vote for Ron Paul because he wants to put it back where issues of that sort belong, at the state level. And I agree, it shouldn't be a federal debate. It should be a debate at the state level.
Well, I mean, it's either murder or it's not murder. It's either a life or it isn't a life. And let's put the number up on the screen, Steve, because I'm betting we're probably pissing off a lot of people here one way or another, and that, I'd like to take their calls, and if this show is going to turn into a pro-life versus abortion debate, then I'm going to go with it. But at the same time, even on the state level, from where I come from, it's just not as important to me as, say, being able to walk across the street and not get arrested. It's just it's more important. It's not as important to me as having my door kicked in and potentially the child that I have alive being shot errantly by a bullet.
And all those things are important. And the thing that is enabling all those things is federalization of everything. Everything being funded and controlled from the national level. Because when you talk about the cops, you're talking about militarization of cops because of federal funding. When you talk about loss of rights,
that's right,
you're talking about the federal war on drugs that has gone greatly that has caused that.
So what you're saying is, if everything, and I guess let's just call this our utopia. And it's not utopia. It's messy. Freedom is messy. It's risky. Risk, as Bruce Fine said on this thing we're going to talk about, the NDA the other day, said, risk is the oxygen of freedom. So, if you don't have the government protecting you every 2 seconds, which, by the way, folks, they can't actually do. That's an illusion. You're going to be, sometimes things are going to be hard, and you may get hurt. But then again, we can't have cameras in our bathrooms to make sure we don't slip and fall in our bathtub, you know? I mean, there's just no way to protect it. As I often say, if you're going down the freeway at 65 miles an hour in a 1-ton piece of metal, you might get hurt no matter how many rules and laws and regulations there are. If you're flying 30,000 feet in the air in a metal tube, you know, you may not make it. That's just how life is, you know? Life kills. I mean, you know, you live and everybody dies, and we do understand. I'd rather take those risks myself. But on a priority level, you know, we got to have our priorities straight. And then we also have to be able to unify. I do work with progressives on levels like anti-war, on liberty issues, which I've been really, I'll say upset. There hasn't been enough of these we've had 20 debates. If you line them up, top to bottom, it's 48 hours of straight debate, allegedly, with these Republicans. And Ron Paul has had to force the liberty, the freedom, the constitutional right, people call them civil rights, onto this debate. And then they change the subject and go back to, well, you said this about this guy, and you said that. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I can understand why people are getting sick of it. And I think it really, with the mainstream media, has been very helpful to Obama on a lot of levels.
Oh, yeah.
But I do work with progressives, and I work with people of various backgrounds and religions and non-religions, because we have something in common, and I think unity is important. This sectarian divide and rule that the establishment and the New World Order wants to see is that, well, you and I can't talk because we don't agree philosophically on something, when we have so much in common. And we debunked this story on our website a couple of months ago that these progressives wrote, and they said, well, the people that sent it to me said, we're voting for Ron Paul because we agree with him 80%, and we kind of don't understand, you know, that's a pretty long way to go. Yeah. We're 80%, we're at the 20-yard line, and we can't, to use a football analogy, and we can't forgive him for something like, you know, being pro-life, or some of these tiny little things, or what he wrote in a newsletter someone else wrote, and his name was on, 20 years ago. Which, by the way, we weren't as politically correct back then, and you would hear that same, whatever he said in those newsletters, it was horrible and just nasty, and oh my God, was the same thing you'd hear Robin Williams saying on The Tonight Show. I mean, we were just a different culture back then, and certainly the newsletter was pandering to popular culture, and otherwise you won't sell any newsletters, so you got to kind of do that. But this is the 20% that people disagree with. All these anti-war people, Jerry, that you would think you've got an anti-war candidate here, and he's not anti-war per se, but they just don't bomb 4 more people in the next year, which is going to happen. They can't reconcile the pro-life stance or something in order to get behind it. Aaron Russo said this right before he died. The great Aaron Russo did From Freedom to Fascism. Mm-hmm. Get that movie. It's free on YouTube. We have it on our site, deadlinelive.info. Said, look, all you Constitution Party people, all you Libertarian Party people, all you Green Party people, you all need to get together and support Ron Paul in 2008 because he's going to get you most of the way there. And then we'll have the argument. At that point, you can go up and you can protest the Ron Paul White House for pro-choice or whatever you want. But at least let's stop this snowball from rolling downhill.
Oh, I totally agree that we can have coalitions on with regard to Ron Paul on issues that a wide variety of people with a wide variety of positions can come together to support with regard to him. I totally agree with that. And I have had coalitions with progressive people as well. And when it comes to liberty, I think that it has broad appeal.
Instead of worrying about Ron Paul, you need to be worrying about, first of all, Obama, who's your president, allegedly. We'll say that. That's another interesting thing. Let me bring that up, because I'm saying allegedly because I'm thinking, his dad admittedly wasn't born in this country, and this is kind of the basis of the Constitution, which is worded somewhat loosely. But I think it should be applied in his case just on that level alone, whether he was born or not. But Mitt Romney is an anchor baby. And you know that Rick Santorum's father wasn't born in this country.
Right.
Do you think they might have put, and McCain, as we know, wasn't born in the United States. Do you think they're putting these people up against Obama so that they can't raise the issue of where he might have been born, and is he truly constitutionally eligible to be president?
Well, it kind of makes you wonder.
He's not naturalized because both parents have to be born here, according to most constitutional scholars.
And the baby has to be born here, too. And John McCain, they claimed that he was born on an Army base, which was American territory, but...
That's a technicality, though, in his case.
But the thing is that I know someone who has a book, an old book that shows that the area where he was born was not even an American base. That was a total fabrication.
A lot of people don't know that Willard Mittens Romney is an anchor baby.
Yeah.
His family moved from the United States to Mexico to escape polygamy laws.
Yeah.
And that he moved here, he was born here, but his parents were not.
Right.
Or I think his dad wasn't.
Well,
who was governor and also ran for president. So it really, it gives, I mean, this is, again, what's Ron Paul? His family has been here for generations. He comes from a farming, hands-on, blue-collar background in Pennsylvania. Let's not have him run for president against Obama, because that really could be an issue.
Well, yeah, he's, hard work. He comes from a background of hard work, having one wife. And what did he just celebrated his 50-year anniversary?
Newt left 2 wives because they were sick, and he's lecturing us on morals. It's to me, it's astounding. I mean, I'll listen to Mitt and to Santorum a little bit on that, I guess, because at least, and not, hey, look, I mean, there's divorced people watching this show. I'm not condemning you. I'm just saying, don't preach to us about moral values if you've left wives on their hospital beds and gone out to have mistresses. It's not, and then want open marriages or whatever. But then again, that's what the country says they want. That's not what they want, because Obama, we hear, in fact, Obama said, you remember when Bill Clinton said, I smoked, but I didn't. I smoked pot, but I didn't inhale.
Yeah.
Obama actually says in his book he tied off. In other words, he was going to inject some heroin, but he didn't inject. Do you see how far we've come here?
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
And if you listen, there's plenty of people out there that will tell you that George Bush and Obama weren't, and they're cousins, by the way. And Mitt Romney is cousins with both of them, and Sarah Palin is cousins with them too. This is admitted.
Wow.
Yeah, this is according to genealogy.com. And now they're related to the Kennedys.
Well, there's definitely an elite in this
So there's
country.
that.
Yeah.
Ron Paul's not a cousin. This is what we talked about last week on the show,
Yeah.
Jerry.
Oh,
is that
okay.
anyone can be president. That's what your teacher tells you in grade school when they're all genealogically related to the black nobility, the royalty of England.
No, you know what Gary North, the Christian economist, said? He said that you have to be either part of CFR Team A or CFR Team B, that no one has ever run for president who has not been vetted by one wing of the CFR and the elites. And
The CFR hates Ron Paul. That kind of explains.
He's an anomaly, and they cannot believe how successful he has been, because the time for his message was right. And they cannot stop the snowballing effect of people finally opening up and seeing that he's right. He was right about the economy. He's long been right about the economy, and long been right about what's happening to our dollar. And people are finally seeing it, and they can't. It's an idea that's time has come, and they can't stop it.
Okay, let's go to the NDAA. Have you been following this National Defense Authorization Act?
Yes, in fact, I called John Cornyn's office and laid into his aid about that, because they tried to tell me this doesn't impact American citizens, and read me one little part that talked about other law, that American citizens will still have the other rights and laws applying to them, but that is totally wrong. They have.
No, it's a lie. It's a blatant lie.
Yeah.
It's part of a long list of lies, And I think what is the, if their lips are moving, they're not telling the truth.
Yes.
Cornyn is one of the big offenders. This is the amazing thing. We were kind of talking about some of these guys earlier. Lindsey Graham, who just hates Ron Paul, and they've fought viciously, but he hates the Tea Party. Santorum, as we mentioned earlier, said that he wants to get libertarianism out of the Republican Party. But these are the same offenders. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Joe Lieberman. They're pretty much behind almost everything from any non-freedom application of the so-called law in this country, and they're behind any kind of bombing of a foreign country. Even with Obama. They'll criticize Obama for doing it, but they just don't like the way he does it. They like that he does it, it's just not the way he does it. And we look at what happened in Egypt. They stole all of Goldman Sachs stole all of Mubarak's money. In Libya, they set up a separate central bank for what would be assumed by most people as terrorists in that country, took all of Gaddafi's money. And that, I mean, we're talking about like $100 billion. There's something behind all of this, not to mention the resources that they can get there. But the blowback and the instability is insane. And because of this, they say we must give up our rights here in America. And Obama has signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, I want to give my listeners, I say that because I'm a radio host, our viewers, an update. 2 days ago, I was on the 10th Amendment Center's press conference with major reporters from the Huffington Post, from the New American, from all sides of the unestablished media for the most part. And I found out that there are states and cities and city councils all over this country that are repealing this NDAA. In fact, in Washington with Matt Shea and his group over there in Washington will go Ron Paul this year like they did in 2008. I have no doubt. He's like a rock star out there. Well, where isn't he? I found out that they've repealed it in the legislature, not just in the city council as kind of a token political statement, but in the legislature. And they're ready to add amendments to that already, and this has gone through. And so has Virginia, that if you try to enforce this on a federal level, that you will yourself face criminal charges if you try to kidnap, and that's what we're talking about, kidnap an American citizen without a trial and hold them in detention without habeas corpus. And this is really exciting that this is happening. So I was on a conference call, and we put it on our site at deadlinelive.info. It's our exclusive. No record of this exists because I was the only one, I think, to tape the call. And we've got Naomi Wolf, who actually was Vice President Al Gore's advisor and has written about fascism extensively. Bruce Fein, Justice Department official. He helped impeach Clinton. He's pretty good on issues of freedom, not perfect, but he also is advising Ron Paul. So right there you can see how people are coming together. Missouri State Representative, former U.S. Marine Paul Kurtman, North Carolina State Senator Ely Kennard. Kennard is an unfortunate name if you're a politician. Sorry, Ellie. Matt Shea, who is amazing, from Washington State, a representative there out of Spokane. Northampton, Massachusetts City Councilor Bill Dwight. And you city councilors in Austin, WTF. We're coming with the documents, and we're going to have you, whether it's a non-binding resolution or not, we're going to have you repeal this to make a statement for people in Austin. I'd like everybody in Austin, if you go to my site and you listen to the 45-minute broadcast of this press conference, you can find the place to download. In fact, it's El Paso CO, El Paso County. It's in Colorado. El Paso, just like El Paso, Texas, CO.com. And you'll be able to download all the documents to take to your sheriffs, to your city council.
County commissioners.
Exactly, to have them, and your legislature, which is the most important because that's what's binding, to have them repeal, stop, and nullify. Okay, that's the important word here, and that's what Virginia just did, to nullify the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, in sections 1021, 1022, and 1023, it says, and I've debunked this along with Bruce Fein, that Obama wrote a signing statement. He said, I will not use this, but watch out, the next guy might. And I really thought that was a very political ploy on his part to say, if you don't vote for me, you're going to get this, but I just signed it. Again, how stupid are people? So what we're talking about is you out there, if you've gone to the wrong website, if somebody gets busted and they just want to throw you under the bus because they said something crazy or stupid, they'll come pick you up, okay? They'll break your door down. I'm not kidding you. This isn't the paranoid conspiracy theory police state stuff. This is the law. This is like the Alien and Seditions Act under John Adams, which had to all be repealed under Tom Jefferson.
Right.
That they can come and do anything they want. They can snatch you, throw you in a van, take you, and you're not allowed to get a lawyer or tell anyone, and you won't have that opportunity because you'll be thrown into a private hell.
Yeah, you won't go in front of a judge. It'll be the military.
But this is the amazing thing, is that not only is this being repealed all over the country, and remember, folks, that in Nazi Germany, a lot of the things that they did there, they made legal. I mean, this was part of their rule of law, part of their constitution. Again, this is semantics, I guess, but that's what they're telling us, that this is all legal. Well, look, so I'm just amazed, number one, that people that support Obama would support him after he did this. People that support Obama that supposedly were anti-war, and he tells them the war's over in Iraq or Afghanistan. I mean, obviously we can see that's not true. And then we go bomb Libya, and then we're about to, any day, I think we're going into Syria, it looks like. The saber rattling has gone beyond that point. That he has Monsanto embedded in the FDA and the Department of Agriculture. I mean, these are all things. He's massively against the legalization or decriminalization against marijuana and the use of industrial hemp. These are all things that I would think Obama supporters would be for. Why are they deluding themselves to look the other way? Is he just the lesser of two evils because, again, they can get their birth control pill if they vote for Obama?
I think it's the same as the Republicans in 2008, most of whom did not like John McCain and did not think he was a real conservative, but thought that they had to vote for him and could not badmouth him. I think the Democrats are as deluded as those Republican grassroots members of the grassroots were.
I'm really sick of these liberals, and I'm not one, I'll admit. You're hypocrites. You liberals in Austin who support Obama, you're hypocrites. How can you explain what he's done? He's done okay. It's all Bush's fault. You know, I got to tell you, what I think is if, and I know this isn't going to happen, I don't want to be negative, but let's be realistic here. They'll kill us all first before they let Ron Paul become president. But let's say, hypothetically say, that doesn't mean you shouldn't support him because the message is great, and who knows, we could change history here. It can happen. I don't completely believe it's not possible, but I think it's going to be pretty tough. But let's just say hypothetically he gets in. He's gonna do this stuff. He's going to repeal the Patriot Act. He's going to start doing all of this stuff. He's going to decriminalize marijuana. He's going to stay out of the state's business, and he's going to try to get all these nonviolent prisoners released from the prison-industrial complex. He's going to end the wars. He's going to stop drone bombing women and children around the world so they hate us for our freedoms. No, because we're bombing them. He's actually going to do this stuff. I mean, that's Ron Paul. He doesn't care. He'll do that, and I guess maybe that's why people aren't going to vote for him. They're scared that we'll have potheads running around everywhere. I got news for you, folks. They already are. And it's illegal, and it's causing a lot of crime. And we've seen every place that's legalized prostitution, for example, or decriminalized it, or decriminalized marijuana, that it just becomes all safer. These are society's things that you're not going to change. Obviously, we've been in prohibition for 40 years and it's only gotten worse. So what is wrong with you people, you Obama supporters in Austin or wherever you're watching this? What excuse do you have for yourself? I got mad there. You see?
I totally agree with you.
Top.
I don't understand why they're not seeing, because Obama has done the opposite of what he said he was going to do when he ran. So the Democrats that supported him are his victims. Even your
health care that you all wanted is just a big fat bonus for corporations and insurance companies that you're supposedly against.
They wrote it. The insurance companies wrote Obamacare.
Too bad Dennis Kucinich caved at the last moment. He was pretty good on this, and they offered him something, and he got nothing. So that'll be a lesson to you people, you team players out there. You're hypocrites, is what you are. The things that you voted for and put Obama into office for, he screwed you on.
exactly right.
I don't know how to say it. That's just right-wing speak, and that's not true. He's trying to do the best he can. He's got a Republican Congress. I mean, I could just hear them out there now saying that. He didn't for the first 2 years. He had the trifecta, as Bush used to call it. He had it all. He could have done almost anything he wanted. In fact, he did do. And his first priority was to reward the insurance companies, Wall Street, and all the people that put him there. And let's be honest, he's not making these decisions. He's got advisors that say, look, if you don't do this, they'll come shoot you, or however they put it. And he goes along with it. So to blame him or not just doesn't even matter. It's Bill Hicks's death day tomorrow, the great comedian, and he said, I have a feeling that when you get elected president, they take you, these 5 industrialist scum bleeps, take you into a back room, cigar-filled room, and they pull down the movie projector and they show you a view of the Kennedy assassination that you've never seen before, and then they ask, any questions? And the president says, just what's my agenda? And of course they say bomb Iraq, because that's what the last several presidents have done. So,
well, I believe that because I think there's got to be some kind of pressure there that is keeping him from doing what he promised he would do.
So we're not blaming him.
He's just we're
not blaming him. Yeah. I mean, he may be out of his hands, but I just know Ron Paul would stand up for him, and I don't care that I'll have no president. If you're not going to stand up against these elites, these Rockefellers, these Wall Street elites, these giant multinational corporations like BP or whatever, if you're not going to stand up to them, then don't even run. What good are you? Ron
Paul has a proven track record of standing up to the leadership in Congress, to lobbyists, to the president. He has never caved in, and he's not going to do what Bush did when he was elected, or what Obama has done with regard to backing away from the promises that he made. He will work and work and work until he fulfills his promises.
That makes us sound like delusional cheerleaders now, so we'll get to, because there are a couple of issues, PayPal/Facebook, Peter Thiel, Bilderberger Peter Thiel, putting money into a super PAC which doesn't go right to Ron Paul, but it goes to the super PAC. And there's also this conspiracy theory put out there that he's somehow in the pocket of Mitt Romney. Well, we were going to go to your call. Freedom21.org. That's a good website about Agenda 21, eminent domain, and all of that. So since the caller dropped and they weren't patient with us, and I'm surprised that people don't just call into this show and just like harass us. This is like this is live, folks. This is a license to just call in and harass us. I mean, I'll probably dump you pretty fast if you're not cool and respectful, but I think we're raising some pretty good issues here. All right, so Peter Thiel, who is a Silicon Valley billionaire. Everyone's got a billionaire. Ron Paul has a billionaire. Part of the PayPal mafia, as they call them. And I don't have a problem with PayPal. I have a problem with electronic money instituted for all of us, with rules and tracking us, everything we buy and sell. But yeah, I mean, he's an entrepreneur. But I am a little conflicted with him being on the Bilderberg Group's steering committee. Like I told you while we were off the air, I think the Bilderberg Group has lost a lot of its clout and power, and I personally, not to make any excuses, but I think that they need Peter Thiel more than he needs them at this point.
Yeah.
And I think the Clinton Global Initiative and the World Economic Forum at Davos and some of these think tanks are maybe a little more powerful than the Bilderberg Group now. Not that you shouldn't still talk about them, but if this was another candidate, and I'm just going to walk in someone else's shoes. If this was another candidate and I saw that he got a bunch of Bilderberg money, or a guy, like Peter Thiel giving him money and he's a Bilderberger, no matter how libertarian he is, like the Koch brothers or something, I'd probably use that against him. So am I a hypocrite because I don't think it's that big of a deal, or just because I trust Ron Paul enough not to cave to a financial donor? How do you process something like that?
I have been following Ron Paul since the 70s, and I know his character. I've seen him demonstrate it. He has never caved in to get money. He could have been making money hands over fist from the lobbyists for the amount of time he's been in Congress. He has never compromised on anything when it came to principle, and I trust him, and I don't care who this guy is. I mean, I leave open the door for anyone to redeem themselves, and maybe this guy has, but to me, he's not the important element. The important element is Ron Paul and his unswerving dedication to liberty and small government, which has been demonstrated time and time again. He doesn't just give lip service to it. If this were Romney or Santorum, who we know have flip-flopped all over the place and have never been consistent and have never stood on principle, yeah, I would wonder about it. Not with Ron Paul.
Well, but if it was anyone else, if they had a spotless record, would you give them a pass on the Bilderberg support?
Well, I'd have to know the person. If they had 30 or 40 years of...
You know Ron Paul personally.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten to meet him.
Yeah.
I've never...
I do know him.
Yeah.
And Rand, too. I've done multiple events with both those guys, and so it does give me a bit of an edge, but I am a little conflicted about it, I got to tell you. But you know what I figured out? I got my own conspiracy theory to answer the conspiracy theory. Peter Thiel is gay, and I think he cares more about gay rights. In other words, I think he cares more that, and you remember Ken Mellman, who was Ron Paul's last campaign manager, was gay. In fact, he died of AIDS. And I think he sees in Ron Paul somebody that will not oppress him as a gay person, and I don't think he even trusts Obama on that. In fact, Oliver Stone said, who's a known, liberal, said he'd vote for Ron Paul over Obama for sure. His son just converted to Islam as well. You think that could be it? Yeah, Oliver. You think that Peter Thiel, his thinking as a gay man, trumps his allegiance to any globalist organization?
Well, I don't know, but I would think as an entrepreneur who understands, who probably understands the importance of property rights and government protecting property rights, but not dictating to companies how they can do business. To me, that would probably be more of a factor.
And that was Steve Jobs' problem with Obama.
Yeah.
I mean, take the handcuffs off the entrepreneurs, not to mention the fact that if you're Peter Thiel, you won't have to pay taxes. The Ron Paul president.
Well, that's property rights.
Yeah.
I mean, those taxes are confiscation of private property, and they're immoral.
Promote, you have an event to promote, because we have 3 minutes left in the show, and I do that in another issue here, but I want to make sure you get this out.
I'll just do this quickly, but one aspect of following Ron Paul and being part of the Ron Paul movement is knowing the importance of rolling back not only federal government, but also local government. And I am bringing a man named Paul Dorr from Iowa, whose nickname is the Bond Slayer, and he has helped communities fight fiscally irresponsible school bonds and other bonds. And this is by invitation only, because there are actually companies that sell bonds that formulate courses to try to beat him. But he helps individuals beat back these bonds, and I am bringing him on Saturday, March 31st, 2012. So if you're interested in coming, I have to screen you to make sure that you're not a pro-bond person who's spying on us. But if you're interested in coming...
Good luck with that.
Yeah, if you're interested in coming, then you can email me at jerrylynnward@gmail.com, and that's JERRILYNN Ward@gmail.com, about an event called Take Back Our County, and it is featuring Paul Dorr, D-O-R-R, if you want to Google him, the Bond Slayer. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and you're on Facebook, and you're one of my friends, Jack Blood on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, deadlinelive.info, so if you can't find Jerri, you can find her by finding me, and she's one of my great friends on Facebook. You're one of my 3,000 friends on Facebook.
As close as you can be to 3,000 friends.
All right, 1 minute left. We'll break this down for you. Ron Paul has not made a deal with Mitt Romney. He knows there's no possible way he could sell that to his supporters. The deal he's made is to get rid of Newt and to Santorum, to limit the race down to 2 people, and I think it's pretty smart. He's playing politics. He's learned his lesson in 2008, and he's applied that in 2012. And the delegate hunt, all of this was set up for Romney. They got the memo, and they are beating even Romney almost at his own game. It's about delegates. Don't let the media tell you that Ron Paul lost something when he won all the delegates. That's really important. God, they're just bloodsuckers, the media. I mean, they are just the biggest creeps, the biggest liars ever, and here we are on TV. So I'm going to tell you, not everything maybe we didn't say something right tonight. Maybe we were wrong about something. Try getting that off of Ed Schultz, or the worst of them is O'Donnell guy, this Larry O'Donnell guy. He's a guy that actually went out and admitted, I'm a socialist, I want to take your guns. So I'll just tell you where I'm coming from. And that should be put into perspective. We're out of here, folks. We'll be back next week with more guests.